real slick last week, making a video about the necessity of walking out on WWE. But admittedly, the video was pretty WWE centric, and then all of this happened. Just like that, the labor versus management debate centered around AEW and MJF. As notable as AEW's Double or Nothing was, it paled in comparison to the drama between Tony Khan and MJF. As of the time of this production, things are still up in the air, so we don't know if they're going to end up working out, so if something changes by the time you see this, just take that as a bit of context. I'm making this video because naturally, people want to compare the situations of Sasha and Naomi to that of MJF. And it makes sense. When you have disgruntled talent expressing that in such close proximity, there's got to be some similarities, right? But I've been noticing something when I've been examining the discourse. There seems to be this standard, like if you supported Sasha and Naomi, you must support MJF. Or if you had criticisms of Sasha and Naomi, you must also be critical of MJF. There's been this need to treat these situations as identical. And I'm going to say right here, they're not exactly identical. And before I go any further, I should make clear that a lot of the info I'm getting here on both of these situations comes from some reputable news sources. Mike Johnson of PW Insider, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com, Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and of course Wade Keller of PW Torch. So everything I am presenting is based off of their reporting. So if anything is not necessarily factual, that's all we have to go off with. So, I don't know, sue me. Now, on to the issue at hand. To paraphrase Jim Ross, when a talent is disgruntled, it's usually over two things, cash or creative. And if we oversimplify these two situations, one is disgruntled about cash and the other about creative. MJF wants his pay, while Sasha and Naomi want their say. That was slick. Both grievances seem perfectly legitimate, and it's okay to side with talent in both situations, but they're not exactly the same. And I'd certainly be the last person to speak out against an athlete getting their fair share of compensation. But I do think there is some context that is necessary. When certain walkouts in WWE have occurred over the years, there's been a campaign to sort of smear that talent. In particular, there's a positioning of the fans against that talent, as if the talent had let down the fans. Let's check out some things that WWE said about Stone Cold Steve Austin when he walked out.
Austin owes an apology to each and every one of you for walking out on you.
Lead performer advertised to be at that event in a major venue, and he didn't fulfill his obligations. He decided to go home.
If you have a functioning pair of ears, you'll notice that the company is definitely getting their customers to side with the company, not with the talent. And to a degree, there is some merit. I have no doubt that on the June 10th, 2002 edition of Raw, part of those tickets were sold based on the fact that they would get to see Stone Cold Steve Austin. Undoubtedly. And to be honest, the fact that they weren't granted that opportunity, it's not cool. Not cool by the talent at all. And you've got to believe, with as passionate as her fan base is, there is a lot of people that have bought live event tickets to see Sasha Banks. With all that said, my criticism of this speaks to more of how WWE presents its programming. WWE presents their programming as an ensemble set, not based around any single individual. For these WWE talents, not delivering on their promise of showing up is a much lesser blow than it would have been had MJF no-showed his match with Wardlow at Double or Nothing. Now, I should note that MJF did commit a version of this sin when he didn't show up to that meet and greet. That was also not cool. But ultimately, MJF showed up to Double or Nothing, got powerbombed a bazillion times, and hopefully Wardlow's career is better for it. But the fact remains, had MJF not have showed up to AEW's Double or Nothing, he would have actually done what WWE has accused the other talents of doing. In that case, such a smear campaign might have actually been slightly justified. Wait a minute. Before you think this is all about MJF's slur, this is not what that's about. Honestly, in my heart of hearts, Tony Khan needs to pay the man, and if he doesn't, it will set a bad precedent. I'm just saying this to present the idea that these situations are not identical, not to hate on MJF. Go get your money. Anyway, back to regularly scheduled programming. By justification of that smear campaign, I mean that MJF would have broken his implicit promise to those fans. Let me explain what I mean. Unfortunately, in so many occasions, fans think they have unfiltered access to a talent just because they paid for a ticket to a wrestling show, when in reality, all they have paid for is the performance of that wrestling show. They're not entitled to autographs at the airport, in public at restaurants, even at their homes. Come on, you weirdos. Stop doing that. Yeah, fans aren't entitled to any of that. But they are entitled generally to a wrestling match or an appearance by a talent, as long as it's manageable. Obviously, there are situations, cards subject to change. We know all about that. But in general, they are expected to perform. And MJF was not going to do that had he not showed up for Double or Nothing. And I do believe this would have been a particular problem within the confines of AEW. Why? Because more so than WWE, they present matches and talent as the attraction. Yes, they do sell the brand, and I don't want to say they don't at all, but they do a far better job of presenting the individuals as the stars. And when it came to Double or Nothing, the first or second biggest match on the card was Wardlow and MJF. They sold that pay-per-view on him appearing there. They sold pay-per-view buys in the form of traditional pay-per-view and Bleacher Report, but more importantly, this was a stadium show. That means people were flying in to see that match. Hey, just as I'm recording this, I just realized I made a mistake there. It wasn't a stadium show, it was an arena show, but I would still say it's a fly-in event, so I think my point stands. Carry on. Had MJF not delivered, the fans would have every reason to be mad at him, and the company would have been right. He would have let them down. And I say this just to note that this pales in comparison to Stone Cold Steve Austin not showing up for an unadvertised King of the Ring qualifier, or Sasha Banks and Naomi walking out before a six-pack challenge that was advertised, I don't know, like 20 minutes into the show. If anything, Steve Austin deserves credit for not wanting to lose to Brock on this small stage, and if he's to be believed, would have lost to him on a much bigger stage, and it would have been better for Brock. Obviously, most of what I've just said is slightly obsolete because MJF did end up showing up, and there is talks between him and Tony Khan. The reason for diving into this hypothetical is to clear up the notion that you always need to side with labor or management in every situation. Obviously, situations can be different, and if you felt different about these situations, it's not because you're a bad person, it's not because you're inconsistent, it's because these situations, at least if they were presented to us, the public, were in fact different. Talk to you next time. If you liked that video, there's more where that came from. Go ahead and check out PW Torch's newly relaunched YouTube channel. Don't forget also to follow us on all our social media channels. And most importantly, go VIP.